Hi there. The Dungeon Master Roundtable you're about to watch is just one of a few topics that were covered during a live stream on the Dicely D&D Twitch channel. And the music you'll hear during this video was created by Tabletop Audio. And now I'll let our guests introduce themselves.
Hello, I am Juce from Master the Game RPG on YouTube. You can check me out. We make all sorts of tabletop RPG content, Dungeons and Dragons, Fantasy Age, you name it. Palladium books is something I'm known for by that community. So yeah, head on over there if you want reviews, opinion videos, live plays, all that good stuff.
My name is Jake Crowe. I run the YouTube channel, the Crowe's Perch, where I cover a bunch of D&D horror stories and other stories like that. I just like narrating other people's stuff because I like telling stories, and stories are fun. And that's why I like playing things like D&D. And you can catch my channel over on YouTube/Crowe's Perch. I also have a Discord. And I recently have little merch, so I got little A do murder. I'm a cartoon bird on the internet. How do you doing?
Hey, I'm Kevin, also known as KR King. My channel is D&D Homebrew. I specialize in homebrewing your own world, creating a entire campaign setting from start to finish. That's kind of what I've always done. I played since the old days. I really like to help people to create their own worlds, but I also analyze modules and different campaign settings, trying to get some of the stuff out of there that you can use in your own world.
Hey folks, Wally DM here. I have a YouTube channel that's focused on puzzles and traps and wrote a book about it.
Well, I'm so happy to have all of you here with me today. And, how's about we get right to it then? So, the first question I have for everyone here is, how would you deal with / facilitate what I call the Fastball Special, which is when a PC throws a smaller player character as a combat or chase tactic. Now, I personally believe that usually players will do this during, a chase sequence because they just want to get that little bit of movement because that's what they need to catch the big bad. But, depending on who you are, you might be somebody to embrace this or to try and, mitigate it as best as you can. But regardless of which way you go, let's start with Wally. Wally, what is your opinion about this? How would you deal with the Fastball Special?
I spent an hour trying to figure out what words, and I think mitigate it best as you can was what I was looking for the entire time. I wish you were there an hour ago. I could have saved so much time on that. I looked this up in the Dungeon Master Guide, and spoiler, it is not in there. So I didn't write anything down as far as an answer goes on this because I just want to be surprised, but yeah, my character is going to toss this other character. Now, most player races are, correct me if I'm wrong, either medium or small size. And I would probably, shake my head and be like, yeah, you toss him 5 feet. Or, make a athletics check with advantage or disadvantage, depending. I don't think anyone, as a dungeon master, now I'm not saying this is the law of the land, of course, but as a dungeon master, I would probably require at least an 18 strength or higher to even attempt that, even with a small person. I mean, you figure you've got full ruck adventuring gear, all of this stuff. You've got 1,375 silver pieces that you just made. And you're trying to toss this little halfling across a ravine so that you can chase down the big bad. It's a little bit out there in my opinion. So I would probably go on the case. Now, if they want to throw him straight down, yeah, go for it. Hey, I'm going to toss this person and be like, yeah, you can throw him as far as you want down the side of the building. That'll work just fine. But as now, don't get me wrong, I do like the premise of it and it sounds fun and everything, but it just, with strength and with as much gear as adventurers are carrying and stuff, I just don't find it feasible. However, I did bring a story with me, and I do want to share that if you don't mind. So in one of my Dragon Heist campaigns, we have a character that's a druid and wild shaped into a mouse, and that way they could sneak in. So the druid was in the pocket, and then we rolled, bad guys came in, we rolled for initiative, and so long story short, they're like, I'm going to throw, his character's name was Hugin, it's like, I'm going to throw Hugin at them. So he's throwing this mouse across the room. I was like, oh yeah, go for it. And then while Hugin's in the air, little mouse, just picture that if you will, no, he wild shapes again into a rhinoceros and just totally smashes into him. So that I can get behind, but that's my answer.
Damn. Yeah. Also, I should have threw this out at the beginning. If anybody has any stories that are kind of attached to this theme, please feel free to share. Now, Wally, I have a question for you. Did they try and continue to use that tactic after realizing it worked the one time?
No, actually, it was kind of a one and done, but it was more of a role play heavy campaign anyway. So, but if they tried that again, gosh darn right, I would love it because it was so much fun.
Wonderful. Kevin, KR King.
Well, I'm kind of with Wally on this. I did some research as well. I found out there's this new class, I think in D&D Beyond, where you have a giant class and they have this mighty impel feature where you can move someone, I think, 30 feet. And that seems to be more reasonable. It always is, if you're going to throw someone, the dwarf tossing cliche, they're going to have to be a halfling or a gnome or something. You're going to have the high strength. So to me, it is kind of a tactic. I know it came from the old Marvel universe where you had, I think, Colossus, who I believe had unbelievable, he's like 6'7" or something, and he had, when he went into Colossus mode, he had tremendous strength, and that's what it would take to do this. So, it is one of those things where it would have to be a very specialized high strength and someone who it's worthwhile to throw them. I guess, we had people being thrown over the crevasse or the lava flow or something in an emergency kind of situation. Now, I did have a situation, I was playing in a game where these guys were all in this thing, they had these portals. They knew they had to go through some portals, and they were arguing, and no one wanted to do this. And I had this crazy guy that played a barbarian. He was one of these, we'll get to it in the question on the paladin behavior. He would go against the group. He just did crazy things. And finally he said, I'm picking up the halfling, and I'm throwing him through this portal. And everyone was like, what? And the halfling is totally irritated. And this halfling played this cowardly character in the group. He was constantly like running away. So he checked, we did a check against, he grabbed him, and he threw them into this portal. He disappears. And then he jumped in afterwards. So, of course, the group is like, well, here we go. And they had to go through the portal to get these guys. So it was his way of getting the group. I mean, they were arguing one of these half-hour, no one could decide this clue, that clue. And I wasn't giving them the answer. And I was just going, it's all the stuff's there. There you go. And finally, this guy said, you know what? Screw it. I'm throwing him through. So that was an instance of picking up a character, but it wasn't really like in a battle situation. Because as I think I agree with Wally, that's, unless you have super strength or you have you play a giant class, if you're playing like the centaur or something that's, and again, a size or so smaller, I just don't see how that's really going to work.
Yeah, that's an interesting scenario where I feel like the picking up another character and throwing them is more applicable in like an exploration sense. Like, clearly you got to get up somewhere higher, you got to get somewhere far over the crevasse. That makes sense to like pick up a character and try and throw them across.
Yeah, like a little step jump or something, right?
Yeah. And this situation is very interesting because I feel like when I think of like characters that present an issue to the group, usually it's like murder hobo. It's not very often you get somebody who's like role-playing the coward, which I think that's way to move the plot along.
And he was a great character in that way. He was always running off, but then at critical moments, of course, because he didn't want everyone to die, he would do something. And the other guy was a total wild card. He was a barbarian. He did what he wanted. So, it was all within the context, and it worked out. If it had been total death to everyone, it might have been a less humorous story to tell.
Understandably so. Everybody's very attached to their characters. Jacob, how... Oh, sorry, Wally, go ahead.
Before you go on, you both kind of inspired me just a little bit there. So I'm thinking of this crevice, and I don't really want to change my answer, but I kind of want to ad-lib a little bit to it. So I would probably allow them to do like a help action. I'm envisioning someone trying to run and trying to jump across this crevice, maybe this little halfling that's not going to make it. And if a bigger person was one there to like grab and like swing him across, I'd probably give him like advantage on a athletics check. That sounds pretty cool.
Or if you had two people on either side, like we used to do it at the lake, where you'd throw people in the water, you'd swing back and forth, and then zing, across. As long as the halfling is amenable.
Yeah, kind of a trapeze artist sort of thing going on.
I think
Jacob,
that's Yeah, to even get into the answer, I think that's the kind of the main thing that I would say. Like, because first off, it's funny, right? Like, let's be honest, it's funny. But aside from just that, though, everyone should be on board with it. It's one of those things where it's like, you could very easily have your not just your character, but yourself and your own agency feel kind of like I'm having it taken from me by a character that just wants to chuck me off from the top turnbuckle. And even if that could be an interesting thing, at the end of the day, if everybody's not on board with it, it's going to end up, with issues or resentment or whatever. And I always want to encourage creative problem solving whenever it comes to any challenge. Like, I know one of the questions coming up includes like, hey, if you want to climb on top of a bigger creature or whatever. But like, I think at the end of the day, as long as everybody's on board with it, as long as you can be able to justify it in the fiction, then it's something that I would allow. Though I would probably have my own caveats depending on the genre. Like, say if I'm playing a game like D&D, I typically try to treat it like, not quite like super realistic, but I try to be at least kind of like, yeah, I would probably say the Colossus can throw a halfling, but maybe not the dwarf. Maybe the dwarf could chuck the fairy, but he won't be able to chuck the halfling probably. Things like that. Like, I guess it really depends on like how you'd want to say like what's the physical strength of the character, what exactly is the person carrying, does it really make sense, or are we kind of pushing it, and also does everyone agree with it?
That's a great point, Jacob, because myself, I'm not like a very big person, but if someone were to try to force me to throw, I can add weight to myself. If I was,
Oh,
and I can see that as character, I can force myself to sit down or something if I'm being forced against my will. So that's a really good point.
Mm-hmm. On that point of like, approval to be thrown, like I've had campaigns where it's like, I'm a small character, quick, use me, we need to do this. And I've had, in the campaign I'm playing right now, we've got a small character, and she's cursed to be a child, so she's very sensitive about it. She's like, I swear to God, if you throw me, I will end you.
I can tell Wally's never been thrown out of a bar by a big bouncer. I can tell you that. By the way, I used to be a bouncer, and I've thrown lots of people against their will. I'm just saying.
I feel like it's one of those things where like the player, like, because for me, even if my character doesn't want something to happen, I myself as a player would be like, hell yeah, throw him. Like, yeah. It's one of those things like, yeah, chuck him, it's funny. But it's like, and then the character, I'll just have him just bitching about it the whole way,
Oh, of course, yeah. There's sometimes there's a distance between what the player is like approving and the character is not. Also, video for the future, Juice and Wally, you guys got to meet up and see how far you could throw Wally.
Hey, live stream idea.
I haven't been a bouncer in 11 years. The only people I throw around now are my kids. They're kind of like halflings, but they're a little bit smaller.
Yeah, you got to catch me first too, by the way.
I have a trampoline. I'll throw you on that.
Yeah, there you
Oh,
go.
this is wholesome.
Help action.
Yeah.
Juice, how has the Fastball Special affected you?
So, so back to the original question. It sounds like it's more consensual, throwing up an ally or whatever. I am always all for it. I don't care what the rules say. I don't care what game I'm playing. I don't care what the mechanics say. Say I'm playing Pathfinder or Palladium or whatever. I don't need a rule for it because to me it's rule of cool. If my party wants to do something awesome, I'm going to let them do it. Now, it could be a few things. If it's in combat, to throw them, to, pick up your halfling or your dwarf, I'll even let it be the stocky dwarf. You want to chuck them like a spear at a bad guy, I'm going to let that happen. Because the
That's
visual
funny.
is cool.
I'd probably allow that.
Yeah, I like to play a more narrative style anyway, and if my opinion is if you can see it in the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings or Hobbit, then it's possible in my game. Now there might be exceptions. If I know a character is a frail wizard with an 8 strength, I'm not going to let him throw a 220-pound character in any way, shape, or form unless he's got some kind of spell.
I might even.
You might let
even say, like, have like the dwarf pick him up, like,
right?
honestly.
Yeah, maybe he reverses.
Yeah.
But yeah, and if you are worried about the realistic aspect of it, all you have to do is look at martial arts demonstrations. I don't know if you guys have ever seen one, but like they'll do stuff where guys run up and the one guy will put his hands like this and launch him 20 feet in the air, and the guy will do a couple spins and land. Gymnasts, cheerleading things. Like you can see people get thrown pretty far that you wouldn't think is possible if you knew how small some of these like people throwing them are. You know what I mean? You're talking about 275-pound people. One of them's throwing the other one 15, 20 feet in the air. And, they make it look effortless over and over again in these demonstrations. So I think we can do a lot more when it's consensual. And we're talking about trained professionals, which our adventurers should be trained professionals. Now, mechanically, how I will sometimes handle it is even when it comes to jumping off things, I will usually ask for an athletics check. If they succeed on the athletics check, not only do I let them do what they wanted to do, a lot of times I let them add damage. I do let them know too, this is not necessarily something I want you to do all the time, but occasionally for a cool factor to spice things up. Maybe combat's getting dull and you got this cool idea to toss the dwarf, over, at the flying monster or whatever. I'll let that happen. And I just think it makes it exciting. And usually what I've found with my groups, which most of my groups are also in line with my style, this is something they'll talk about 2 months later, 3 months later, like, oh, do you remember that one time? It makes it far more memorable. It doesn't even matter what the monster was. They will remember the monster now. They will remember who threw who. One story that didn't involve me as a DM or anything, I was just playing alongside it. We had a bar fight and someone literally threw the dwarf, and it became like the running gag every time we were in a tavern. Are you just going to throw the dwarf to start the fight this time? And it was a continual thing that everybody loved. But I could see how certain people who want something more realistic don't like that. And I think it's important, again, as I've said before, understand what your group likes and dislikes. Because if 4 out of the 5 people love this kind of stuff and one, it just pulls them out of it, maybe that person isn't best for your group. Or maybe they need to learn how to suspend disbelief. And that's a discussion you have to have with that person.
Yeah, it's like, there's so much in that where I absolutely agree with you. And I'm like, yeah, I think most of the answers I was looking for, you supplied me with there.
There you go.
That being said, I do also have some opinions on this as a victim of I keep saying victim, but it is all
right.
Fun in the end. It's a hilarious thing to see implemented.
The chasm thing, like if you're putting a chasm there to prevent them from, like, to provide an obstacle and their solution is just throw them over every time, that's annoying. And that's why I think it's important that you say, hey guys, I love the creative problem solving. And when let them know when they do it once, I'm going to allow it this time. Next time I might not allow it, just a heads up. I've always tried to tell people when I think something's cool and not in the rules, I will tell them, I love it. I will let it happen this time. Next time I won't be as forgiving.
Juice,
and that seems to solve that for me.
Do you have a max distance on that? Like if they decide to throw them, is there? So you're going to allow this?
Yeah.
What's the distance? Is it 5-10 feet? Is it 30 feet? Is it just?
I use my discretion of the moment. It's going to depend on the characters, I think, and just your discretion. Now, I don't think it's realistic in any way, shape, or form to throw somebody over a chasm, by like their belt and their shirt and and all their gear. I'd probably say rule of thumb 30-40 feet maybe at max. And that would require like an 18 to 20 strength character throwing a halfling probably, or a wizard, somebody who's a little more frail, probably doesn't have a lot of gear, might also, like an elf maybe. Again, it would be a situational thing for me. But I'm pretty forgiving when it comes to it. Again, could you see Legolas doing it with Gimli, or Gimli and Aragorn maybe at the, when he throws him 20 feet? Can you see it happen in that? If the answer is yes, I'll allow it.
Are we talking Legolas in Lord of the Rings or Legolas in The Hobbit? Because that was very different.
Well, in The Hobbit,
Legolas
apparently he
Hobbit.
doesn't weigh anything because he can run down falling bricks.
Yeah.
So in that case, you could throw him 50 feet.
They all got bones made of rubber too, apparently.
For sure.
But yes, I definitely agree with like the rule of cool aspect of it, where it's like you don't want it to become the reoccurring tactic. It's like, if you rule of cool too often, then it's not cool anymore, and you want to savor those moments. I had once in one of my campaigns, this was a tactic that was used during one of my chase scenes for an NPC that I wanted to survive, but because of this throwing tactic, they did end up catching this NPC. They ended up chasing this character down like an open circular stairwell, and the NPC was ahead. And of course, the fighter's like, I'm gonna toss the halfling further down the stairs. And I'm like, well, yes, potential consequences in this situation. The halfling will probably get hurt because you're going a distance and also falling. And if you fail, they're going to fall the whole way down. Thankfully, the check was like really good. They threw the halfling, hit the NPC, but they did injure their own legs. So that was the kind of consequence I imposed on that. They ended up killing this NPC, this halfling. And that's when the beholder showed up. I was so not ready for this to go so far downhill. And it seemed like throwing the halfling was just the straw that broke the camel's back. I was just like, this went from a bad situation to awful. But yeah, so I think letting the characters know that there are consequences to actions sometimes, they might try and get away with it this one time, but knowing in the future, if they consider this an option, it might not end so well.
I love it when there's a story behind the questions and the DM roundtables.
Yeah, these questions are all like, a little piece of trauma for me tonight.
Yeah,
And
this is something you would have typed on a Facebook group or something. This happened, but instead we all get to talk about it, and I love it.
Let me see. I just wanted to review my notes and see if there's anything more on this topic. Yeah, I mean, sometimes, especially in the chase scene, like I'm not a big fan of the throwing in a chase scene because players are clearly just looking for extra speed. Consequences I might throw on that might be like, if you throw them now on your turn, that's going to use up some of their speed on their turn. So like, it doesn't make the huge gap difference, but you will get to move now as opposed to later if that's somehow important for you guys. Like, just trying to find like the ways to balance it and but not completely sap the fun away.
Yeah.
So after that incident, Denny, have you changed your position on that? Is that something that you've told the group that it's not happening again, or just out of curiosity how you resolved it afterwards?
Well, after I beat them into a submission with a beholder, I don't think they tried it again after that during that campaign.
Okay.
I hadn't really reflected on that, but yeah.
Nice. Do you do a lot of chase scenes? Because I can't think of really that many in any of my games ever.
I think in that campaign there were 3. That feels like a lot. There were 3 in that campaign. The one I'm running right now, there's only been 1.
Yeah.
I might use these more than I think I do.
I've had a couple, but it's usually very quick. It's like, will they be able to close the distance based on their speed? And they like real quick, they're like, nope. Or they're like, yeah, we can catch them because we got the monk with 40, and so we're gonna go. And then it's usually they catch them within a round anyway, so it's not even a real
Especially
chase
with
scene.
monks or
And I don't go
tabaxis on there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the most recent time I ran a chase scene, we're kind of getting on a different topic here, but it involved like a thief like hopping onto like a carriage that was just driving away, and everyone's like, we have to find horses stat. People would find horses, use their spells, use their grappling hooks. Like, it was an intense like street chase. And they were just using all of their tools to try and figure out, how can we catch up to this guy on this carriage, or can we disrupt the driver, get the people in front out of the way in time. A lot of variables.
We have some determined players.
I love them for it. Anything more on this topic before we move on?
the consequences thing I think is important, like you mentioned. So I did want to quickly touch on that because I didn't say much about the chasm stuff. Yes, there should be consequences, and like I said, I will require an athletics check to throw them. There's also something I've thought about and something I've been trying to do more lately is group athletics checks. So in this case, you might require an athletics check by the thrower, and maybe an acrobatics or athletics check by the throwee, and require a certain number, like a DC 25 or 30 even, depending on, the difficulty. So if it's like that maximum range of like 35 feet on a chasm, yeah. And then I might even be a little bit more, a little nicer than other people. But if they fail, I might even allow a saving throw by the halfling to grab the other edge or fall to their death or fall to whatever,
I always hesitate to do the straight up save or die. I do like the idea though of a fail would be they're on the edge,
Yeah. Maybe they catch it, even though they failed the save,
because
and they dislocate their shoulder.
Exactly, because they did fail. They didn't do what they set out to do entirely. So I would kind of do like a success with a complication kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, like they're on a ledge or something like that, or they.
Definitely.
It's a classic, or they're hanging onto a vine or something.
Yeah, like needs help, can't do it by themselves.
Exactly.
That kind of thing.
And that is why we always take feather falling.
The side of the wall bludgeons their face before they can do feather fall, and they take 76 damage from the rock to the face.
Okay, so you let,
and their charisma goes down by 1 because they're not as pretty anymore.
You let somebody with a strength 16 toss a dwarf carrying a full ruck, but my feather fall is going to meet the side of a cliff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you still hit your face. You now can use feather fall to not die at the bottom.
Okay.
Yeah. And you lose 1 to your charisma because now you have a scar on your face, unless you revivify, whatever the spell is, restoration or whatever.
Right. That unfortunately this sparks a memory for me of an orc walking across a rope bridge, the bridge snapping, hanging on, smashing into the wall, and falling into the river below and drowning. That's how that character's first session went. No rolls.
That's a lot of chances though to survive still. He drowned. He didn't die from the impact of the tension on the water or the rocks in the water.
The smashing into the wall knocked him unconscious.
Oh.
I received enough damage to just fall into the river. It was an unfortunate time.
And it's unfortunate he didn't wash up onto the beach like just 20 feet down like in the movies.
The fugitive, right? Coming out of the dam or whatever. Right. An unsurvivable fall.
One more quick question. Do any of you ever do any of these scenes, especially in particular chase scenes, as skill challenges?
It's a nice way to do them.
Yeah.
I've actually been part of one that was as a chase scene. I've ran chase scenes just using like movement and stuff, and I've also been a part of one as a skill challenge as well.
I kind of do a mix between those. Like I've played a lot of like Blades in the Dark, for example, and one of the things they have there are clocks, right? And clocks basically keep track of like how many successes and whatnot lead to your eventual goal. So what I'll do for something like a chase scene is I'll have like a clock that will say, if this fills up, they get away. And another one saying, if this fills up, you catch up to them. That kind of thing. And then have the skill challenge correlate to those to think of them almost like progress bars as they go up and down, and like a push and pull.
And that brings us to the end of this discussion about when characters want to throw other characters as a tactic in D&D. Be sure to follow all the folks who were present in this video. You can find links down to their channels in the description below. And until next time, may you always play dicely.